Right, these days the UFC is ridiculously popular due to the likes of Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, Brock Lesnar, The Ultimate Fighter, many other reasons, but the UFC is the #1 fighting organisation on the planet. But of course, that wasn't always the way. There was a time when the UFC was illegal on TV.
That's fucking illegal.
People didn't give it the credit. People weren't interested. They just didn't watch. So there was a lot of fighters that were legendary, that were so skilled, former champions, but they just don't get the recognition and the credit that they deserve. So today, I'm going to take you through a list of the top 5 underrated UFC fighters that you might not have heard of if you're a so-called newbie. Number 5, Luke Rockhold, the Samurai, UFC middleweight champion and a former Strikeforce middleweight champ with a record of 16-6. Now, last time out we saw Luke Rockhold was at UFC 278 against Paulo Costa, and he showed the world what he's made of. That was a tremendous fight, a blood and guts performance, literally nuzzling his face into the blood and guts. But it was an inspiring performance, and he went out on a bang, with a bang, and he showed the world what kind of warrior he truly is. But Luke Rockhold didn't always get the recognition that I feel that he deserved. Now, granted, I didn't help.
Conceive, believe, achieve. Shut the f***
We
up.
had 2 fights. He beat me in the first one. The second one, I knocked him out at UFC 199. And, I kind of turned him into a meme. I talked a little bit of trash. But the reality is, leading up to that moment, Luke Rockhold really was one of the best that we'd ever seen. The ability of this man is incredible. He could be a professional surfer, skateboarder. He's a great jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's got incredible kicks. He is a natural athlete that could do whatever he wants. And before being with the UFC, he was probably one of the best fighters that Strikeforce ever had. He won the title from Jacare Souza, and then he defended the belt versus Keith Jardine and against Tim Kennedy. He also had the most finishes in Strikeforce history with 7, and the most submissions with 5. Now in the UFC, he earned the title shot, as I said, by beating me, and then going on and destroying Lyoto Machida when Lyoto was in his prime. And then, of course, when he got a shot at the title against Chris Weidman, he not only won and became the champ, but he absolutely dominated Chris Weidman from start to finish. Luke Rockhold was good enough to beat anybody on his given night. Now, as I said, towards the end, he got knocked out 3 in 4 fights. That's never good. But that was against myself, Yoel Romero, and Jan Blachowicz, the former light heavyweight champion, Polish power. Absolutely no shame in any of those fights. And as I say, his last one in the UFC against Paulo Costa showed what he's truly made of. Number 4, Rich Franklin, UFC middleweight champion, UFC Hall of Famer with a record of 29-7. Now, 10 years on from his retirement, newer fans probably don't know about Rich Franklin. The man was a very clean-cut guy, didn't talk trash, didn't swear. He was a former math teacher that started competing in mixed martial arts in the late 90s. And when the UFC was kind of seen as this blood and guts sport and they were trying to revamp the image, Rich Franklin was one of their main guys. A former math teacher, for crying out loud. As I said, a religious guy. He doesn't swear, clean cut, always looks fantastic, always says the right thing. But inside the octagon, this man could fight. Before he got a call to fight in the UFC, he had a professional record of 17-1, and once he got there, he made a big name for himself, knocking out Ken Shamrock on The Ultimate Fighter Season 1 finale. He then won the UFC middleweight title in his next fight with a win over Evan Tanner, and he defended the belt against Nate Quarry and David Loiseau. Now, as I say, he was one of the early faces in the UFC because he was so clean-cut, so presentable, a former math teacher, and he could bloody well fight. He also went on to coach Season 2 of The Ultimate Fighter and became a huge star. But, unfortunately for Rich, he then lost to, at that time, a relatively unknown Anderson Silva. And of course, he then lost the rematch. And if you saw the state of the nose on Rich Franklin, I mean, it was so broken and so bent. If he followed his nose, he'd be going round in circles. Now, losing 2 fights against the champ means you've got to hope that somebody comes in and beats the champ. Beats Anderson Silva. But as we know, Anderson will go on to have the longest UFC title reign of all time. 2,457 days. So that kind of left Rich Franklin in kind of a no man's land. No chance of a title at 185, but probably undersized at 205 pounds. So then he had a series of main event fights at a catch weight of 195 pounds. He beat the axe murderer Vanderlei Silva twice, and of course he lost to Vitor Belfort. But in one of his final fights, he also knocked out the Iceman, Chuck Liddell, in a wild one-round brawl where Rich Franklin actually had his left forearm snapped in half, but then he knocked out the Iceman with the right hand. And if you look at the man's record, I'm telling you, Rich Ace Franklin fought legend after legend, and he always gave as good as he got. Number 3, Frankie "The Answer" Edgar, former UFC lightweight champion with a record of 24, 10 and 1. Now the reality is Frankie "The Answer" has always been underrated his entire career. He actually auditioned for The Ultimate Fighter Season 5, but the producers didn't think he was a right fit for the show, and they probably thought he was a bit too small. Now, he did get his shot in the UFC in 2007, and he went 6-1 and went on to earn a shot at BJ Penn for the UFC lightweight title at UFC 112 in April 2010. Now listen, BJ Penn was the absolute man at that time, and this was voted as one of the biggest upsets of the year by ESPN. Frankie Edgar went out there dominated, 50-45, 49-46, 48-47, so he cleaned it up on all 3 scorecards. And when the UFC gave a rematch at UFC 118, he won the fight even more convincingly, 50-45 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And who could forget those legendary fights that he had with Gray Maynard? The first one, all-out classic, UFC 125, that was scored a draw. And then Frankie went out there and got a 4th round KO of Gray Maynard, right? These were 2 amazing fights. Edgar dropped, badly hurt in both the opening rounds, but you can never, ever count out Frankie Edgar. Now, he did go on to lose the UFC lightweight title, of course, to Benson Henderson, and in their rematch also. But some people think that Frankie Edgar deserved to win both of those fights, especially the second one, which was actually a split decision. He then went on to earn 3 shots at the UFC featherweight title. Now, granted, he never won those, but the fact that he earned 3 title fights in another weight class, I mean, that just shows what kind of guy that we're dealing with here. And the reality is, he did all of this with probably being a natural bantamweight the whole time. But if you look at his record, some of the names that he has beaten, we're talking a prime BJ Penn, Charles Oliveira, who's on top of the world right now, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendes, and Sean Sherk. The man is a legend. Number 2, Sugar Rashad Evans, a former UFC light heavyweight champ of the world, and of course, a Hall of Famer with a record of 19, 8 and 1. Now, Sugar Rashad Evans, he was an incredibly talented wrestler with heavy hands, confident, brash, but he backed it up inside the octagon each and every time. He went out there, he beat the likes of Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Forrest Griffin, Quinton Rampage Jackson, and Dan Henderson. He also got a sneaky first ever defeat or win over the one and only Mikey B. That's right, 2007, Newark, New Jersey. We were both 15-0. He'd won season 2 of The Ultimate Fighter. I'd won season 3, and he beat me via hotly contested split decision, if I don't mind saying. Now, the reason I say that Sugar Rashad Evans became underrated is because sadly in 2015 to 2018, he didn't get a single win. And this was at a time when the sport was absolutely blowing up in terms of popularity. All the new fans who had discovered the UFC during that Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey era, all they saw was Rashad Evans lose. Rashad went on to lose to Ryan Bader, Glover Teixeira, Daniel Kelly, Sam Alvey and Anthony Smith, and then he retired from the UFC, not having won a fight in the octagon in 5 years. But the truth is, Rashad Evans was never the same after he tore his ACL in 2013. He had to get the ACL replaced, and then when the replacement didn't really take, he then had to have the entire surgery done all over again. When he came back, he just wasn't the same fighter. The speed, the explosiveness, even the confidence, it was all gone. Before the injury, he was 19-3-1, with those losses coming to Lyoto Machida, John Jones, and Antonio Rogério Nogueira. Now, trust me, I know what I'm talking about here. Sugar Rashad Evans was the real deal. A fantastic fighter, an incredible wrestler and boxer, and an even better person. Alright, this brings us to number 1. I am, of course, talking about a true legend in every sense of the word, a 2-weight division champion, a UFC Hall of Famer, a record of 16-14-2. I am, of course, talking about the prodigy, BJ Penn. Now, when you hear that record, 16-14-2, that doesn't really sound like a legendary fighter. Almost as many losses as wins. But if you scratch beneath the surface, you'll see why. BJ ended his career on a 7-fight losing streak that was really tough to watch. From 2011 to 2019, BJ lost to Nick Diaz, Rory McDonald, Frankie Edgar, Yair Rodriguez, Dennis Seaver, Ryan Hall, and Clay Guida. In total, he only won 1 fight in his last 11 appearances inside the octagon. So that's why it doesn't really paint the true picture of how talented this man was. To BJ fans, this was a painful 8 years because BJ is one of the most beloved and talented fighters of all time. Now, there's a reason why this man is called the Prodigy. He was a legitimate BJJ black belt under Andre Pederneiras, and he earned that black belt in just 3 years. Anybody that has done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they know how hard it is to get a black belt. Some people never achieve that. For BJ to go out there and get it in 3 years, that is just crazy. He was the first non-Brazilian to win the World BJJ Championships in the year 2000. In mixed martial arts, he was only the second man to win a UFC Championship in 2 different weight classes, welterweight in 2004 and lightweight 2008 to 2010. Now, nobody has beaten BJ's records of 3 successful lightweight title defenses. Yes, 2 people drawed. We're talking Frankie Edgar, 3 people, Benson Henderson, and of course, Khabib Nurmagomedov. He beat Matt Hughes twice, Caol Luna, Matt Serra, Jens Pulver, and Takanori Gomi. And he was even crazy enough to step up multiple weight classes to fight the very talented Lyoto Machida for him in March 2005, and that took place in K1. Now, Dana White even says that BJ Penn was one of the biggest mainstream stars from the lighter weight classes. And without him, it would have taken a much longer time for them to bring around any weight classes lower from 155 to all the way down to flyweight. Listen, records, as I say, they don't tell the full story. If you scratch beneath the surface and you see what BJ Penn was all about, the man was ferocious, incredible jiu-jitsu, beautiful boxing, hit very hard, flying knees, the balance, the takedown defense, and the attitude that BJ Penn had, and the willingness to step in there across multiple different weight classes, stepping up to fight Lyoto Machida. The man is a true throwback fighter and an absolute legend.
The best fighting in the world is BJ Penn.
Anyway, there's my list. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. Anyone that should have been on there, and do me a favor, subscribe and ring that bell.